everybody. I'm Jamal Simmons. Welcome to the Career Expo. I think you guys have most of you been through one session already, but we are joining a really great conversation we're going to have with three additional panelists. I'm going to welcome in right now. So I want to bring them into the room. There's Daiwan Tatro, who's a senior advisor for strategic outreach at the DCCC. Monica Guardiola, I think I got that right, Guardiola, who's at the DNC. She's the Deputy Executive Director. And then Kelly Byrne Martin, and she runs the Independent Expenditure at the DLCC, the Legislative Caucus. So everybody, welcome for being here. Welcome here. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm just going to get started by talking to the panelists and getting them to tell you a little bit about what they do, where they work, and what the opportunities are. And then there's going to be a chance for everybody to join in and ask questions. So you'll have, I think, on your chat screen, the ability to ask questions. Those questions will get pushed up to me, and then I'll try to get to as many of those as possible before we get out of here. So we've got about, looks like about 40 minutes, maybe 45 if we stretch it a little bit. So let's see how much we can get in with our group. I just want to say this is an especially exciting panel for me to be involved with as we're thinking about the committees and the hiring process for 2024. I started working in politics when I was 13 years old. I was walking door to door on presidential campaigns for McDonald's and like whatever $5 or $10 they were giving for in the field office on weekends. So that was my first presidential campaign when I was 13 years old. I've pretty much done every press job since then. And then for the last year until January, for about a year, I was communications director for the vice president, deputy assistant to the president at the White House. So I feel like I have seen it all, right? I've been congressional races, Senate races, consulting side, staff side, campaign side, committee side. So I will just tell you, it's an exciting career. I think those of you who are already in it already know that. Make room for your private life. Don't forget about that. I'm going to just tell you that's my own editorial advice. Don't forget to make room for your private life and be intentional about that as you are about your career. Don't end up like me becoming a dad a little bit later in life, although it's fine if you do it. With that, I think I'm going to turn around and just bring the panel back in, and let's start to get at it. I think we're going to start with Monica, because you're at the DNC, and if you can kind of walk us through a little bit, because the big kahuna of a race in this cycle obviously is going to be the presidential race. It's going to be a lot of money raised, a lot of money spent, a lot of inside and outside players. So Monica, if you could just maybe give us your impression of what the opportunities are going to be on the federal side to be engaged with the presidential campaign, both through the national campaign and through the DNC, that will help us get started.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamal, and thank you all for attending and for your time as we kind of share our thoughts, and hope I can provide some helpful insight. Here, I think this is going to be a different cycle than we've seen in the past. I think the DNC is bigger than it's ever been this time of year, and we're really providing a lot of the infrastructure to help as the presidential launched and as we're building out in the states. And so it's a really huge opportunity for the DNC. Currently, as you can imagine, we are hiring for the kinds of roles that one would imagine. Fundraising, both grassroots and major donor, is our biggest push right now. I think we're all just trying to, as we always do, try to imagine, look into the glass ball and see what might be coming, but we want to be as smart as possible with the dollars that come in. Obviously, the DNC has the capacity to raise money, and we really want to be smart about it and how we hire and support, of course, the presidential campaign and other federal races. I think for this year, it'll really be some infrastructure building. I don't think we're going to see the big hiring at the DNC until in either, quarter one, quarter two, depending on how things shake out on the Republican side, and then also the money that comes in as we're working so hard to raise it now. But we know we're going to have to scale, and that is what we're preparing for now, is to really scale when the time comes when we do need to hire all the folks in the coordinated campaign, and keeping an eye on that and working closely with the state parties so that we are all ready and prepared for that to happen in the early part of next year. That is when we'll see the massive hiring for the presidential campaign. There you have it.
Great. And do you see, I know there's back and forth between the headquarters and the campaign and the state campaigns. Do you expect, because we are not expecting to have a contested primary, or at least a very contested primary, do you expect to see a lot of staffing take place in early primary states or in the primary states, or will it all pretty much go to kind of more of either a battleground or 50 straight, the old 50 state strategy of a wider range very quickly? Like, how do you see the focus happening from the hiring side?
Yeah, I think on the what I see happening, I think infrastructure wise, like there's opportunities at the DNC, I think, because we're preparing for the state races. I think for the primary races, we will have a few hires just to prepare for what's going on with the Republicans. So you can imagine that I can imagine we would have maybe some comms people working with those primary states. But because we intend to not have, our hope is to have an uncontested, and we shouldn't have a contested primary. We'll be more on the defensive there, just, or opposition, just preparing for the Republicans and really focusing on our strategy with the battleground states and other states where we may have some opportunity that we're learning from in 2022.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks so much. So let's go now. I want to turn to Daiwan. You're over at the DCCC, and obviously the one house that we don't have, the one piece of power we don't have, is the House of Representatives, and everybody's very interested in getting it back. Although the DCCC did a great job last year with everyone holding losses to a minimum in what should have been a record year of Republican turnout. Can you tell me how you all are thinking about the races, and how many races do you see being really in play this year?
Ooh, I think that, our path to victory is primarily going to run through New York and California this cycle. So, we should be on the particular watch for 5 or 6 races in New York, and I think about 7 in California that could really decide control of the House. But, things are still shaping up. I would refer everyone to our frontline list to see, the races that we are currently interested in, which we have made a decision this cycle to try to keep that frontline list as lean as possible in order to maximize resources and strategy in those races, right? We have to close a very small margin in the House. We had a great success and exceeded expectations last cycle. And if we can be strategic and lean and precise in our work this cycle, right, we can accomplish our mission, and not only accomplish the mission, but I think we will exceed that goal.
Good. And from a staffing perspective, where do you see the big opportunities being?
So right now, we are staffing for the building. We've been building out our research, analytics, political, and campaign teams. Our communication team have just begun spinning up. So for all you comms people out there, now is the time to be watching our jobs board, or maybe entering yourself into our talents bank. And then we could reference those resumes as we move forward on that front. And then as we move into the on year, we will be staffing for the IE and organizing departments, right? And organizing will probably be our largest department here at the DCCC. And so we will have staff that work for us out in the field, as well as working with different state committees to build out their staffs on the ground.
So that's a good point. So can you say again how one might go about applying into one of those positions? Where's the place to go?
Yeah, so If you go to DCCC, to our DCCC.org, and you go to our jobs page, you will see a list. I think there's about 27 jobs posted right now. Check with us, I would say twice a week, because we are constantly posting new positions. We are in the thick of hiring right now. And then, but the other thing that you can do there is enter yourself into our talent bank. Those resumes do not end up sitting in a folder somewhere. We use that talent bank all the time as a resource for when we're looking for qualified candidates across different positions. And so you can get out ahead of the game by just entering yourself into that.
Great. Thank you, Damon. All right, Kelly, I saved you for last for a reason, because your role is a little different than the roles for the committees. And I would love for you to explain for people who may not be as familiar how the IEs work versus the committees that can coordinate. And what are these? Give us a little bit of sense of the Chinese walls and all that.
For sure. Well, thanks, Jamal, for the question. I really appreciate it. I also just want to thank my fellow panelists. Fun fact, I am an alum of their committees as well as being a team member at the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. So it's great to be here with all of you and everyone watching. So as Jamal said, I'm the Independent Expenditure Director at the DLCC. So what that means is I am, when firewalls go up, which is typically at the beginning of the on-year, depending on the state, I am prohibited from working with candidates or committees in the work that we are doing. So that is because of campaign finance rules and restrictions. At the DLCC, we operate in 50 different states with 50 different sets of campaign finance rules and regulations. So we follow the letter of the law and operate by those guidelines in all of our targeted states and with our chamber partners. But we are, as I said, prohibited from working directly with candidates. So we're operating programs and thinking strategically about how to program in chambers independent of our hard side partners and candidates. That looks really interesting and different state to state, but some of the traditional roles that the independent expenditures play are defining our opposition, those Republican candidates whose values are completely misaligned with our own, and defining the stakes. And I think we know that in 2022, the stakes were really high at the state level with the overturning of Roe and the Dobbs decision. We also know that like most of the harm that's being done to our communities in the last decades have started at the state level and really been seated at the state level. So for us, protecting our democratically held chambers, protecting some of the new trifectas that we picked up in the midterms is top priority for the DLCC. I will just take a little bit of presenter's privilege because I've been at the DL since 2021. And last cycle, I worked on the hard side. So I do have working knowledge of how we're going to staff on both sides of the wall. And the structure looks similar for us. So I'll just kind of lay out what that looks like at the committee itself. But like our other committee partners here on the panel today, the work that we're doing is really happening in the state. So I want to talk a little bit about caucus structure too, because it's different than some of our other levels of the ballot. So at the DLCC, we have a regional structure in our political department, and we also have some department support. So we have regional political directors. There are 6 folks on our hard side team who are supporting state caucuses and legislative leaders in all 50 states, and focusing especially on our battleground chambers for the cycle ahead. And we mirror that structure on the independent side. So we have cycle staff who will come on to the DLCC in probably towards the end of this year, probably beginning of next year in Q1 of 2024, who will join us in regional political capacity as well. And then we will also be hiring for an IE side political coordinator. So again, that mirrors our hard side structure. On the hard side, we run a year-round operation. So unlike some of our other committee partners and some larger national organizations, we're a year-round operation. This year, we're very focused on taking back the majority in the Virginia House and protecting our majority in the Virginia Senate. We have legislative elections in other states this year as well. And we deal with special elections all of the time, especially in places like Pennsylvania, where we have been fighting really hard this year to protect our majority in the Pennsylvania House. In places like New Hampshire, where we are less than 5 seats away from a majority and can literally take the majority through special elections, we think, in the off year. So we're a year-round committee, which means that we don't have as much kind of cycle-based hiring on our political team, but we will have some opportunities, as I said, to staff up the IE side later this year. I do just want to touch on caucuses as well, because for us at the DLCC, our caucus partners in states are our core partners, and there is a ton of hiring that happens at the caucus level. So we believe that caucuses that are governed by legislative leaders in each chamber are the most efficient kind of organization to run campaigns through. It's a centralized structure where the caucus supports all of the targeted candidates and campaigns in a chamber and provides field support, political advising, fundraising support, you name it. They're the kind of campaign strategy team that supports all of our legislative candidates in their districts. As I'm sure you can imagine, at the DLCC, we have 7,000 races in an on year, just under 7,000 races. So the volume of work is intense. And these caucus structures kind of help us to centralize and make the work more efficient and more effective. So our political team on the hard side are supporting our caucus partners and their staffs, and they will also be staffing up towards the end of this year and in the on year. There are already opportunities in the states and in caucuses in places like Virginia, as I mentioned. They're looking for some comm staff at the moment. Places like Arizona, which is on our battleground map next year, to pick up both chambers, fingers crossed, if we do the work right. They're currently looking for a deputy caucus director and a finance director, as well as campaign managers. So it's not too early for us to be hiring in the states. And when we have year-round infrastructure, it really helps us get out ahead of what is going to be a really important but crowded election year. So I did just want to put in a pitch for our state partners. And like Daewon said, on the D-Trip side, we will also be adding some members to our organizing and state finance teams later in the year. Our organizing team supports field directors in states and in caucus programs, and our state finance team helps to raise the money that our candidates and our caucuses need to win next year. So we will be adding folks to our committee team in addition to the caucuses who are going to be hiring directly in the states as well.
All right, Kelly, thank you. You had a lot. There's a lot in there, and there's stuff I'm going to follow up on. That was good. I liked it. All right. A million years ago, when now Congressional Black Caucus Chair Stephen Horsford was a state senator, we helped him. We were consultants at the time. We helped him win that Nevada State Senate caucus back, which helped in the redistricting of that time period a million years ago. Can you explain just a little bit why the legislative races are so important? And again, when we did that, he was he kind of led that caucus, and it was the same thing. And so we ran the individual races, but really it was the caucus campaign team that really focused on those, on the races that were targeted. So can you explain the importance of legislative races? Why is it that people should be focused on them from a national and a state perspective? And then which battleground chambers, where do you think the focus is going to be for the chambers to either win back or protect?
That's a great question. I mean, I think I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but right, like the bad news that we're hearing about terrible Republican policies that are really affecting people, affecting communities. These policies are being passed at the state level. They're being passed in state legislative chambers that are governed by Republicans. And I think they are seeding these terrible policies that are attacking communities of color, that are attacking trans people, LGBTQ people, attacking teachers for teaching, history. Like it's all attacking people who can get pregnant. it's all starting in state legislative chambers. And I think Republicans adopted this model of governance decades ago, and they got out ahead of us. And I think we have the DLCC and partners have been steadily working our way back. And I think we had a better redistricting cycle in 2020 and 2021 than we've had in previous decades. And it allowed us to take back power in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and those other chambers that we picked up in the midterms. But I think the stakes are really high at the state level. And when we have such closely divided federal chambers, Republicans know that they can use their power at the state level to really inflict harm on us and our communities and our families and friends. So I think for us, the stakes are really high. The other thing I'll say is like the importance of state legislators. As you said, Stephen Horsford is now a member of Congress, right? We are the pipeline, and elected officials and wonderful politicians who we respect and admire cut their teeth in state legislatures. So the folks that we are recruiting to run for state house are the next governors, are the next U.S. senators, and President Obama was a state legislator. So we know that these folks are the future of our party and the future of the policies that are going to make our lives better. And it's an honor to support them every day. It's an honor to help them build smart and well-run and strategic campaigns when they're running for state house and state senate, because we know it pays dividends later on. And that's why we're focusing on fundamentals like knocking doors and making sure that they're raising money and doing call time and all of the things that are really important to be able to run successful campaigns.
Awesome. Daiwan, I want to ask you a question that just has come up, because there are a lot of folks who are watching who are first-time job seekers, and so some of this lingo might need to be decoded. So let's try to unpack it a little bit. And one of the things we talked about was in-cycle hiring. So can you just talk about how the DCCC is thinking about what does in-cycle hiring mean to you for people to understand, and how are you guys thinking about the math between the off year and the on year?
Yeah, sure. That is a excellent question. And so for here at the DCCC, our election cycle happens over the course of every 24 months. And, once we come out of an election, we tend to staff down. And, that's usually a function of fundraising. The dollars are just not coming into the building right after the election has happened, right? People have won or lost, and we have to take that time to reset. And then we begin staffing back up for the cycle, right? And when we're right now at the DCCC, we are in the off year. And so there's a certain set of hiring across different departments that is appropriate for us to do now. And a lot of that is structured around analytics and research and really setting the foundation for everything that we will do on the battlefield next year, right? And what we will say here at the DCCC is the on year. And that's when we will start bringing on a majority of our organizing team that will be stationed in districts across the country, right? And so there's an ebb and flow to our hiring here at the DCCC, as there is at many committees. And it just has to do, one, with fundraising, two, with the cyclic nature of our electoral politics.
Great. And again, anybody who is watching this who has a question, please ask the question in the chat, and we will get around to it. Monica, can you explain how the DNC will function this year in terms of how you guys are thinking about what we used to call coordinated campaigns, right? Like, how are you thinking about how you will coordinate with the state campaigns, the campaigns for Senate, for Congress, the Ledge, and what the role will be for the DNC with the statewide organizing?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamal. And can I add one really quick response also to the cycle hiring? I think one of the, I know for new job seekers, what it means is, if in November of 2024, at the end of the election, it means that essentially so many people will be looking for a new job. What I think truly are the benefits, I've been on various campaigns, is One, there is something gratifying about knowing that you have a date that you're working towards, and everything that you're doing, it's like a single-minded goal. And while it seems scary that you won't have a job in November or December of that year, 2024 being the next one, is you really do build so many. You're all in it together, and the bonding that happens with those teams continues, I think, through the course of your career in politics. And it does mean that you will change, which I actually like the change of it all. Like every 2 years, it's a whole new challenge. Essentially, what remains the same is we continue to work to elect Democrats, but this field is so dynamic, and it gives you that opportunity to really change. And with that change really comes professional development. And I think once you have a year or two on a campaign and you enjoy it, people move up so quickly. And so I just did want to put in a plug for people who are new job seekers. It seems a little bit crazy to apply for a job and put so much effort knowing it has an end date. But it just seems like there's always the next campaign, or if when we have the administration, there's jobs available, and the people that you meet are people that are filling those roles. And I think the same with the DTRIP and the DS. Either they're on the Hill or they become consultants, but it's really the relationships you build on those campaigns are lifetime relationships. So back to your question, thank you for giving me the privilege of just adding to that answer. We will continue, as always, the way we are being set up is to anticipate the coordinated campaign because we will have an uncontested primary. We can, again, push that down a little bit and really save money so that we can use it in a smart, efficient manner when the time comes. But we continue to build those relationships with the state parties. And, as you mentioned, yes, it'll be coordinated, and some states will have a Senate race, an important Senate race, and they'll be raising even more money. And so the relationship becomes a partnership with that particular campaign. And we are looking at, as usual, at the battleground states where we will, the DNC will come in and set up the infrastructure for that coordinated campaign to be set up. And I, in the past we have done, and I know in 2022 we did like our campaign boot camps in the even numbered year, so in the on year, and that is something that we we'll consider. It is just such a different cycle because it's uncontested. And I think the last cycle, there was so many talented people on so many different presidential campaigns, and just trying to map it out and see what makes sense and the timing of it. We really haven't quite figured that out yet. Again, it'll really just depend on how well we raise funds to prepare for that. But in the meantime, at the DNC, we are setting up all the infrastructure, all of the processes. I come from a world of operations, and so just setting up the SOPs to really hand out to the states and really train them, work closely with the state parties to train them on how the actual process will work and what it is we will need. And really just building that foundation now so that when the time comes, we can just hit go. And that it is at that time that we really will be hiring so much in the states. And so I think for those people who are looking for jobs, I would say those jobs will really hit starting in the February, April time is the beginning of it. And then May and June of next year, it really just takes off with the organizing team. Similar to the other committees, what we have now and what we're holding on to at the DNC is the research, finance, and also at the DNC we support a lot of the tech and the applications. I will vote for the ecosystem, and that is what is being built at the moment.
Monica, it occurs to me while we're having this conversation that there may be people out there who, let's say you graduated from college in the spring of 2020. They're really, that was such an odd year because of the pandemic, right? So we didn't have, I was going to ask you like what the staffing was like in the last presidential cycle, but that was such a weird year because of the pandemic. So I'm just thinking, how many people do you think ultimately, just a ballpark number that we end up having working for the national campaign and the DNC by the time we get to the fall of 2024?
Not really. Again, it is a new year and a lot of things changed in organizing, but, and this is truly just my opinion, nothing can change the fact that, talking to a voter, knocking on their door and talking to them one-on-one, it makes the difference. And while we do have digital organizing and it's incredibly efficient and effective, we still need those organizers hitting the streets and knocking on those doors. Things have changed dramatically, but we anticipate it'll be like any other year. And by the time it's all said and done, the campaign as a whole, including the presidential and the DNC, I don't see it being any different than previous years, where we build, where we have close to 2,000 employees across the entire apparatus of it.
Great. Kelly, I'm going to ask you this question because I think your role requires you to be focused on the legalities of campaign finance law more than I think the rest of us always have to be aware, but I used to just call Perkins Coie every time I had a question and do whatever they told me to do or not do. There are going to be these other entities that exist that people will start to hear about that are not going to be in the committees, these super PACs and other organizations that will be on the ground doing field, doing GeoTV, doing advertising. Can you just explain a little bit as best you can kind of what the constellation of groups are that people might want to think about as and how they work together or can't work together in the coming cycle?
Sure. A peek behind the wall. So I think, most folks are familiar with some of the larger super PACs who will be all over the airwaves and running huge multi-million-dollar ad campaigns in support of Joe Biden and members of Congress. But there is also a constellation of organizations focused on issues and I keep coming back to our set of progressive values, doing organizing work year-round on the ground in states. And for us at the DLCC, those folks are some really key partners for us on the IE side. And these are, sometimes state-based organizations doing year-round community organizing, advocating for policies at the state level with their legislators. And these folks know and understand their communities intimately and are raising money to do, to exercise their political capabilities during election cycles and talking about their values and their beliefs and the priorities of their communities and connecting those priorities with candidates who are running for state office and running in their communities. So there are wonderful organizations in every state doing this work. They're really core partners of ours. A lot of those organizations belong to, state voices tables on the nonpartisan side and America Votes tables on the political side. And as I said, they're doing this work year round. It doesn't just kind of pop up for them during election cycles, but they are key partners to us in connecting political priorities and values and policy to elections. And so they are an additional network of opportunities, jobs, and campaigns that kind of filter out into the states as well that aren't part of the committee side of things, but are doing really valuable work on the independent side as well. And as I said, they're not directly coordinating with campaigns and candidates for legal reasons, but they are doing really valuable and meaningful work. And we rely on that work to lift up our candidates and our level of ballot at the state level.
Right, Dawan, I'm going to ask you a question that might be a little bit, it's a little bit awkward, right? So last year in 2022, the federal races were the Senate and congressional races that were a big deal. Of course, there were governor's races and leg races in the states. This year, you're going to have the presidential race happening at the same time. Can you just do a little bit, maybe it's a little bit of a pitch, right? Like, what is the benefit of being on a congressional campaign in the coming cycle versus being a moth to the flame of the presidential that that attracts people, to try to get there?
I think, so let me just say, I think, both missions have a great deal of are equally important, right? And honestly, we don't get much done one without the other. I don't know if working on the presidential is better than working on the DCCC. I think that comes down to an individual's preference and like what's best for them in this political ecosystem. But I will say here at the DCCC that we are cognizant of the fact that we are in a presidential year that makes hiring more competitive. We have to be thinking through when we're hiring people, is that person committed to stay here throughout the cycle? Or is this someone who we would say sort of a flight risk and is going to end up on the presidential or on a Senate race somewhere? And, we can't prevent that. We don't have a glass ball, but it is a real challenge for us in terms of hiring, right? There are a lot of opportunities at the presidential level where people come off of the campaign and go into the administration. But I'll say, Joe Biden has been in office already, and a lot of them positions are already filled. And so, there's not the same opportunity at that level that there was in 2020. And just a pitch here for the DCCC, like we have been doing a lot to better retain not only staff in general, but diverse staff. There was a union put in place here last cycle. We have paid transparency, better healthcare benefits, more diverse staff, so forth and so not. So, we are positioning ourselves as a committee to be competitive in the hiring space and to be a place where people want to work, not only, when the going gets tough and we're worried about being in competition with a presidential, but cycle over cycle here.
I will say I did a Senate race in Georgia earlier in my career, and it was, I would say, the most I learned more on that campaign than being in the state than I learned on any national campaign that I ever did. And the relationships that I built on that campaign, both for the consultants, one of the reasons I ended up being a spokesman on a presidential campaign is because I had been in a state race and got to know the consultants who then went to that campaign, and they brought me with them to come to the campaign, and then sort of, kept moving from there. So I would say, like, for one of the opportunities, and Daiwan, you did a good job kind of laying it out. I would add one of the opportunities that you get is what Monica went to earlier, a more personal and intimate relationship in some way with the senior level of the campaign, with the candidate principal, who you may see more often. At this point, you probably won't get to see Joe Biden very much unless you are, on that kind of core campaign staff. So, or Kamala Harris, vice president. So there is some use of being in these congressional races and these statewide races and these ledge races, because these are relationships, that will last for a long time. Monica, one other question I wanted to ask you, because there's another entity that we haven't discussed yet, but it's coming. I know you guys are planning for it. It's growing. It's like a shadow over the DNC, which is the convention that will happen in the summer of 2024. And so can you talk a little bit about what the opportunities might be like on the convention?
Yeah, and it's very exciting. And I think what people don't realize oftentimes that it is, it starts at the DNC and then it really takes off and becomes its own entity as the Democratic National Committee Convention. Very excited that it is in Chicago this year. And that group has started already. I think there are only 2 staff members now. I think we are waiting for us to have a CEO named, and we hope that is coming in the next couple of months. And I think after that, there will be some hiring. I would probably just say a handful of people, and very operational focused. It's a lot of contracts are being worked on now, and also, as usual, some fundraising, which is all of us. That's always at the base of all of it. But the real hiring for the big event again will probably similar to the coordinated. It'll happen in late first quarter, and it'll. Most of those opportunities will be in Chicago with some remote work possibilities, but it'll be early part of next year. but very excited for it to be in Chicago.
Awesome. And Kelly, let's go back to you for a second on the IE side. How do you see the roles that you'll have at your disposal, and how much of it would you say is split between kind of your mail media research arm versus the people who are on the ground touching voters and organizing?
Yeah. Well, I will say at the DLCC, we run a pretty lean IE operation. So the staffing that I already talked about is coupled with a vendor team that will handle mail, digital, television, perhaps, and other programmatic pieces, including research. We are in the process right now of RFPing for our vendor team. And we will do that kind of through the fall of this year. And those folks, they're core team members for us as well. On the research side, since you kind of outlined that specifically, the folks who are working in state capitals, they're seeing the votes that are being taken every day. Those are core partners for us in doing the opposition research that we need to run smart campaigns come election time. So we do a lot of work through research consortiums that are rooted in the states and paying attention day in and day out to what's happening in state capitals. And they're really important partners to us, and their research is the foundation for the work that we're doing. That is not always in-house for us at DLCC, but we utilize those in-state consortiums and subscriptions to augment the work that our research team will do when we have laws go up within our committee.
Great. I do want to ask one question, because you brought this up, and we started to think about this when I was at the White House during the 2022, right before the 2022 midterm. Obviously, how people are consuming media is changing so much. And so now we know people are, sort of scrolling on their phones and getting more news than they are by watching television in many cases, and certainly by reading anything, by reading newspapers. So I developed something for the vice president's team, which I called PHP, which was pictures, headlines, and posts. So everything that we did, we thought about what the image was going to be. That image might be a photo, it might be a video. So what the image of the event was going to be, what sort of headline we thought would get captured, and then that we wanted to be captured, and then what the digital post was going to look like that we're going to put up and share. And so that's just becoming so much more of how the communication to real voters is occurring. And this is just a jump ball for anybody who wants to get in. How are you all thinking about your digital teams and how the digital teams will be integrated with the rest of the campaigns? I think digital is becoming ever more important in communication.
I will just, highlight when it comes to reaching specifically communities of color. We can target those communities and do outreach to them over digitals in ways that we can't do over TV, for instance. So it is really a precision tool for us at the DCCC when it comes to reaching, there's more hard to reach communities that we can't reach through mainstream apparatus. And so we are thinking through that in very real and serious ways here at the DCC.
I'm happy to jump into. I think, for us at our level of the ballot, digital has also always been a really core piece of program, because we do not have millions of dollars to put on television in every single legislative race around the country, right? That is a struggle that will continue for us. But I think it's also an opportunity to really get creative in how we are reaching voters and the voters that we're reaching, to Taiwan's point. And I love your framing, Jamal, the PHP. I think for us, right, like imagery is really interesting, because our candidates are not Joe Biden, right? Like they're not recognizable to many voters. So I think it gives us an opportunity and a challenge in how we are creating a narrative around our candidates or our opponents, and how we are, zigging where others are zagging to like rise above the noise, because folks don't know who our candidates are and they need to. So digital is one of the most important modes for us to be able to do that, because people are spending so much time with their eyeballs on their phones and moving to connected TV and like not subscribing to cable or broadcast. So I think for us, digital has always been important, but in this kind of evolving environment, it's still one of our really important fundamentals.
And Jamal, go ahead, Monica.
No, just quickly to echo what you both said, and I see it as another tool in our toolbox, and I think it's a newer tool, and so I think it is exciting, and we're all being more creative on how we use it, and then also analyzing it differently. At the end of the day, it just comes down to like what votes are we getting. But here at the DNC this last cycle, we actually had a digital organizing team, like really focused on that and just trying to see what the payoffs. I think it was incredibly successful. And now just look really, it's tricky because we don't know. I think it's a new area that will continue to grow and that we will continue to analyze, but really exciting times. And to Juan's point that we are reaching a different voter. And now we'll just analyze like, what is it that gets them to turn out? So thank you.
And Jamal also had, there was an article that came out last election cycle around where young people in particular were finding information around issues, right? And they were running those searches over TikTok and Instagram rather than Google, right? They wanted to watch a short form video on a policy position, on a subject, on an important public issue, rather than reading something about it on Wikipedia, right? And so we have had to become more creative and pivot into the data and where people are in terms of our media mix to really try to maximize the effect, the impact, the reach of our message.
Great. All right. Well, I think they are closing us out here. So does anybody have, let's go around for any closing thoughts. Monica, I'll start with you.
Again, thank you for the panelists. Nice to meet you. Thank you everyone for joining. And I think it's exciting work. I keep saying this is my last cycle, and I said that 3 cycles ago, and I'm still here. But really encourage people to get involved. If you're interested in jobs at the DNC, please go to democrats.org. As I mentioned, we do have some postings now in the fundraising space, and it'll be later in the summer as we start building. But thank you for everyone, and I look forward to seeing you out on the campaign trail.
Awesome. Kelly?
Well, thanks, Jamal, for being a brilliant moderator. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I will just ask folks to go to dlcc.org/careers. On that page, we feature opportunities within the DLCC on the committee side, but also postings from our caucus partners in states. So if you are looking to work at this level of the ballot, I think it is incredibly rewarding. It's tough work, but it is at the core of our democracy. So I welcome you to visit that page and look forward to opportunities to work together. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Daiwan, take us home.
Yeah, I'll just encourage, everyone not to underestimate the breadth of the opportunities in the political space, right? We do comms, we do digital, we do organizing, we have an IT department, research, analytics. There are a lot of different policy. There's a lot of different jobs in this space. So if you're interested in this work, the DCCC is long, acted as a training ground for individuals working across the democratic ecosystem. And so please go to dcc.org/jobs, apply to positions, put your names in the talent bank, and let's win.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you to such a great panel for being here and for all your thoughts and your insights. I want to encourage everybody to apply for any opportunity that you think is going to suit you and your interests. I want to also thank the folks at GAIN for inviting us all, for having me here, and for bringing this all together. And I think we're going to bring in, is it Phil or Muthoni? Somebody else is going to hop in here and transition us out of this panel. All right. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Somebody else will be with you soon. That's all for us, and we'll see you next time.